Captain Jake Morrison stared out the window of the bridge as stars moved past like tiny diamonds. The research ship New Horizon had been traveling through deep space for 3 months now. It was humanity's first real trip beyond their own solar system, and Jake felt proud to be leading the mission. "Captain, we're getting close to the Kepler system," said Amy Rodriguez from her station. She was the ship's communications officer, a young woman with bright eyes who always stayed calm under pressure. "Should I start the scanning procedures?" Jake nodded. "Go ahead, Amy. Let's see what's out there." The bridge was quiet as the crew worked. Dr. Lisa Grant, their chief medical officer, was running health checks on everyone. Paul Carter, the ship's engineer, was making sure all systems were running well. Ben Taylor, their security chief, watched the sensor readings for any signs of danger. "Captain," Paul called out from his station, "I'm picking up some strange energy readings from the third planet. It looks like technology." Jake felt his heart beat faster. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. The energy patterns are too organized to be natural. Someone built whatever is making those signals." The crew looked at each other, with excitement and worry. They had hoped to find signs of alien life, but now that it was happening, everything felt different. This was real. "Amy, can you try to make contact?" Jake asked. Amy worked at her station for several minutes. "I'm sending out our standard greeting message on multiple frequencies. If there's anyone out there, they should be able to detect it." They waited. Space was silent around them, filled only with the quiet hum of their ship's engines. Then suddenly, Amy's equipment started beeping rapidly. "Captain, I'm getting a response. It's complicated. The signal is unlike anything in our databases. The patterns are mathematical, but there's something else. It's almost like music." "Put it on the main speakers," Jake ordered. The bridge filled with a strange sound. It was beautiful in a way, like crystal bells ringing in harmony, but there was something cold about it too. The sound seemed to have layers, as if multiple voices were speaking at once. "That's definitely artificial," Dr. Grant said quietly. "No natural process could create something that organized." Before anyone could respond, Ben Taylor shouted from his station. "Captain, multiple ships just appeared on our sensors. They came out of nowhere." Jake looked at the main screen. 3 enormous ships had materialized around them, each one 10 times larger than the New Horizon. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time, made of what looked like living crystal that glowed with inner light. "They must have some kind of advanced cloaking technology," Paul said, his voice tight with worry. "I never saw them coming." The crystal music from the speakers changed. It became sharper, more demanding. Amy worked frantically at her station. "Captain, they're sending us new signals. I think they want us to follow them." "Do we have a choice?" Jake asked Ben. Ben checked his weapon systems and shook his head. "Not really, sir. Our weapons wouldn't even scratch those ships, and they have us completely surrounded." Jake made the decision that would change everything. "Amy, send them a message. Tell them we come in peace and we want to talk." Amy sent the message, but the response was immediate and frightening. Beams of light shot out from the alien ships and wrapped around the New Horizon like glowing ropes. The human ship was completely trapped. "They're pulling us in," Paul reported. "I can't break free. Their technology is way beyond ours." Jake felt helpless as their ship was dragged toward the largest of the alien vessels. Through the windows he could see an opening appearing in the crystal ship's hull, like a mouth opening to swallow them. "Everyone stay calm," Jake told his crew. "We knew this mission was dangerous. Now we get to meet our first aliens. Let's try to make a good impression." Dr. Grant moved closer to Jake. "Captain, what if they're not friendly? What if they see us as a threat?" "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Jake replied. "But right now we don't have many options." The New Horizon was pulled inside the alien ship, and the opening sealed behind them. They found themselves in a vast chamber filled with the same glowing crystal material as the ship's exterior. The light was everywhere, making everything look dreamlike and strange. "Atmosphere readings?" Jake asked. Paul checked his instruments. "It's breathable, but just barely. The air pressure is different, and there are gases here that we don't recognize." Before they could do anything else, shapes began moving in the crystal walls around them. Tall figures emerged from what had looked like solid material, as if the walls were made of thick water instead of stone. The aliens were unlike anything humans had ever imagined. They stood nearly 8 feet tall and seemed to be made of the same crystal material as their ships. Light moved through their bodies in patterns that might have been their version of blood. They had no faces that humans could recognize, just smooth surfaces that reflected light in complex ways. "My God," Dr. Grant whispered. "They're beautiful." The lead alien moved forward and made sounds like the crystal music they had heard before. Amy tried to understand, but her equipment couldn't translate the complex harmonics. "I think they're trying to communicate," Amy said, "but their language is nothing like ours. It's based on sound frequencies that our voices can't make." Jake stepped forward, keeping his hands visible and empty. He tried to smile in a friendly way, but the aliens seemed to react badly to this. Their crystal music became sharp and angry. "Captain," Ben said quietly, "I think they just interpreted your smile as a threat display." Everything went wrong very quickly after that. The aliens surrounded the human crew with weapons that looked like pieces of singing crystal. More aliens appeared from the walls, and their music became loud and frightening. Jake realized that humanity's first contact with alien life was turning into a disaster. The aliens seemed to think the humans were dangerous, and there was no way to explain the misunderstanding. "Nobody move," Jake ordered his crew. "Let them take us. We'll figure out how to fix this later." The aliens forced them out of their ship and deeper into the crystal vessel. Jake looked back once at the new horizon, wondering if they would ever see their home again. The mission that was supposed to bring glory to humanity had become something else entirely. As they were marched through corridors of living light, Jake couldn't help but think that things were about to get much worse before they got better. If they got better at all. The aliens locked Jake and his crew in separate crystal cells deep inside their ship. Each cell was a cube made of the same glowing material as the rest of the vessel, but these walls were solid and thick. Jake could see his crew members in nearby cells, but he could not touch them or speak to them normally. High Commander Vexthul stood before Jake's cell. The alien was taller than the others, and the light patterns moving through his crystal body were more complex. When he spoke, his voice was like wind chimes in a storm, beautiful but cold. "We will study you," Vexthul said. His words came through a translation device that made his voice sound mechanical. "Your species is unknown to us. We must understand what you are before we decide what to do with you." Jake pressed his hands against the crystal wall. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding. We came here in peace. We just want to talk." Vexthul tilted his head in a way that seemed curious. "Peace. This word appears often in your transmissions. Yet your biology suggests violence. Your teeth are designed for tearing flesh, your hands can form weapons, your facial expressions show aggression." "That's not aggression," Jake said. "That's called smiling. It means we're happy or friendly." The alien commander made a sound like breaking glass. "Impossible. Showing teeth is a threat display in every species we have encountered. You are either lying, or your species is fundamentally flawed." Another alien approached Vexthul. This one was smaller and moved differently, like a scientist rather than a warrior. The light patterns in its body pulsed in steady rhythms. "Hi, Commander," the scientist said. "I am researcher Kyle Moth. I have prepared the testing chamber. We can begin studying the specimens immediately." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Specimens? We're not specimens. We're people. We have names, families, hopes, and dreams just like you do." Kyle Moth made a sound that might have been laughter, if aliens could laugh. "Fascinating. The creature believes it has consciousness equivalent to ours. The delusion is quite complete." Guards came for Jake first. They were smaller than the commanders, but still much larger than any human. Their crystal bodies were darker, more like black glass, and they moved with military precision. They opened Jake's cell and surrounded him with weapons that hummed with energy. "Wait," Jake called to his crew as the guards led him away. "I'll be okay. Just stay strong." Dr. Grant pressed against her cell wall. "Jake, be careful. We don't know what they're capable of." The testing chamber was unlike anything Jake had ever Scene. The walls curved in impossible ways, covered with devices that looked like musical instruments made of light. In the center was a chair that seemed to be grown from the same crystal as everything else. The guards forced Jake into the chair. Immediately, crystal bands grew around his arms and legs, holding him in place. He pulled against them, but they were stronger than steel. Researcher Kyle Moth approached with several floating devices that looked like glowing jellyfish. We will begin with basic pain response testing. This will help us understand your neural pathways. Hey, wait a minute, Jake said. You can't just torture people, that's wrong in any language. Kyle Moth paused. Torture? No, this is research. We must understand how your species responds to stimuli. Every race we have studied follows predictable patterns. Fear leads to submission. Pain leads to cooperation. It is the natural order. One of the floating devices touched Jake's arm. Immediately, pain shot through his body like lightning. It felt like every nerve was on fire. Jake gritted his teeth and tried not to scream. But then something strange happened. The pain was terrible, but Jake found himself thinking about how ridiculous the whole situation was. Here he was, strapped to an alien torture chair by creatures made of crystal who thought they were doing science. It was like something from a bad science fiction movie. Despite the pain, Jake started to chuckle. Kyle Moth stepped back, his light patterns flickering in confusion. What is that sound? Are you malfunctioning? The pain got worse, but Jake's chuckle became a laugh. You know what's funny? I always wanted to meet aliens, but I imagined them being a little more professional. This is like being interrogated by angry Christmas ornaments. The researcher's lights flashed rapidly. Impossible, the pain receptors are clearly active. You should be experiencing significant distress. Yet you produce these strange vocalizations. Jake laughed harder as another wave of pain hit him. Oh, this is distress, all right. But you know what they say back on Earth. If you don't laugh, you'll cry. And I'm not giving you the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Through the crystal walls, Jake could hear his crew members. Dr. Grant was calling his name. Ben Taylor was shouting threats at the aliens. But Paul Carter was doing something else. He was laughing too. That's the spirit, Paul, Jake called out between waves of pain and laughter. These guys have no idea what they're dealing with. Kyle Moth increased the intensity of the pain device. Jake's vision blurred and his body shook. But he kept laughing. The researcher moved closer, studying Jake's face with instruments that looked like crystal butterflies. Your species defies all known patterns, Kyle Moth said. Pain should produce fear. Fear should produce submission. Yet you respond with this incomprehensible behavior. Jake grinned through the agony. You want to know a secret? Humans are crazy. We do the opposite of what makes sense. It's kind of our thing. The torture continued for what felt like hours. Kyle Moth tried different types of pain, different intensities, different combinations. But every time Jake responded with laughter and jokes. When they used heat, he complained about the air conditioning. When they used cold, he asked if they were trying to freeze him or preserve him for later. Finally, Kyle Moth stepped back, his light patterns swirling in what looked like frustration. This is unprecedented. In 3,000 years of research, no species has ever responded this way. High Commander Vexthul entered the chamber. What is your progress, researcher? High Commander, this creature is either completely insane or represents something we have never encountered before. It experiences pain but responds with what appears to be expressions of joy. Vexthul approached Jake, who was still strapped to the crystal chair. Despite hours of torture, Jake was still smiling. Human, Vexthul said, why do you not submit? Why do you not beg for mercy? Jake looked the alien commander in the eye. Because that's not how humans work. You can hurt us, but you can't break us, and the funnier this gets, the less power you have over us. Vexthul's light patterns flickered. Funnier? Yeah, Jake said, his grin getting wider. You're getting upset because your torture isn't working. That's hilarious. You've got all this advanced technology, all this power, and you can't figure out why one little human won't stop laughing. I bet you're really embarrassed right now. For the first time since the humans had been captured, the aliens looked uncertain. Their confident scientific approach was meeting something they had never seen before, and they didn't know what to do about it. As the guards took Jake back to his cell, he was still chuckling. His body hurt everywhere, but his spirit was unbroken. And from the sounds coming from the other cells, his crew had gotten the message. The real test was just beginning. Jake sat in his crystal cell, still feeling the pain from the torture session. His body ached everywhere, but he couldn't stop smiling. Through the transparent walls, he could see his crew members watching him with a mix of worry and amazement. "Doctor," Grant pressed her face against her cell wall. "Jake, are you okay? That looked terrible." Jake stood up slowly, wincing but grinning. "You know what, Lisa? I've had worse dental appointments. At least these guys didn't charge me for the experience." Even Ben Taylor, their tough security chief, cracked a smile at that. "Captain, I can't believe you're making jokes after what they did to you." "That's the point, Ben," Jake said, raising his voice so all his crew could hear. "They want us to be scared. They want us to break. But if we can laugh at them, they lose their power over us." Amy Rodriguez spoke up from her cell across the corridor. "The aliens looked really confused when you started laughing. I could see them through the doorway. They kept checking their equipment like something was broken." Jake nodded. "Exactly. They've probably tortured hundreds of different species, and everyone else probably begged and cried and gave up. But humans? We're weird. We laugh when things get really bad." The next day, the guards came for Paul Carter. The engineer looked nervous but tried to put on a brave face as they led him to the testing chamber. Jake called out to him as he passed. "Remember, Paul, think of it as a really bad amusement park ride." An hour later, they heard something unexpected from the testing chamber. Laughter. Not just any laughter, but Paul's distinctive chuckle that everyone on the ship knew. The sound echoed through the crystal corridors. When Paul returned to his cell, he was beaten up but grinning. "You were right, Captain. I told them their torture device needed better customer service. I think I really annoyed them." Researcher. Kylemuth appeared in the corridor soon after, his light patterns flashing rapidly. He stopped in front of Jake's cell. "What is wrong with your species?" the alien demanded. The second specimen responded exactly like you did. "This is impossible." Jake shrugged. "Maybe your research methods are just outdated. Have you tried being nice to people? You might get better results." Kylemuth's lights pulsed angrily. "We have studied over 200 different species. All of them follow the same basic patterns. Pain produces fear. Fear produces submission. It is a universal law." "Well, congratulations," Jake said. "You just discovered that universal laws aren't as universal as you thought. Humans don't work, like your other test subjects." The alien scientist moved closer to the crystal wall. "But why? Your pain receptors function normally. Your nervous system responds to stimuli. You experience genuine suffering, yet you react with these incomprehensible vocalizations." Paul spoke up from his cell. "It's called having a sense of humor. Maybe you should try it sometime." That evening, the guards came for Amy Rodriguez. The young communications officer was scared, but she remembered what Jake and Paul had done. As they strapped her into the torture chair, she took a deep breath. When the pain started, Amy screamed at first, but then she remembered something her grandmother used to say about laughing through tears. She started to giggle between the screams. "You." "No," she told Kylemuth through gritted teeth. "This reminds me of my first job interview. Same level of stress, same feeling that someone was trying to break me down." The researcher increased the intensity, but Amy kept talking. "The difference is my boss didn't have glowing tentacles, though now that I think about it, that might have been an improvement." By the time Amy returned to her cell, she was exhausted and hurt. But she was also laughing. The entire crew was now united in their strange form of resistance. Other prisoners in the ship began to take notice. The crystal corridors held dozens of cells containing members of different alien species that the researchers had captured over the years. Most of them had been broken long ago, sitting quietly and waiting for whatever came next. But the humans were different. They talked to each other, made jokes, and seemed to get stronger instead of weaker. A few of the other prisoners started, moving closer to their cell walls. trying to understand what they were seeing. One of them was a creature that looked like a giant mantis with blue skin. It had been captured months ago and had barely moved since then. But now it was watching the humans with interest. "How do you do it?" the mantis creature asked in broken universal language. "How do you not break?" Jake looked at the alien prisoner. "What's your name, friend?" I was Warrior Zektar of the Bladewinds clan. Now I am nothing." "Well, Zektar, you're still something to us. And here's the secret." Jake leaned against his cell wall. "They can hurt our bodies, but they can't hurt our spirits unless we let them. And the best way to keep your spirit strong is to find something funny about the situation." Zektar tilted his head. "Funny? There is nothing funny about torture." "Sure there is," Paul said. "Look at these researchers. They think they're so smart, but they can't figure out why we won't act the way they want. They're like scientists who are confused by their own experiments." Amy nodded. "And they keep increasing the torture because they think more pain will work. It's like someone trying to fix a radio by hitting it harder and harder." Dr. Grant was taken next. As the guards led her away, she called back to her friends. "If anyone asks, tell them I'm at the spa getting the full treatment." The torture session that followed was the longest yet. Kylemoth was determined to break at least one human. He used every device he had, tried every technique in his research files. But Lisa Grant, despite being a doctor who understood exactly what was happening to her body, kept making medical jokes. "You know, your bedside manner really needs work," she told the researcher between waves of agony. "I've seen veterinarians who were more gentle with sick animals." When the pain got worse, she started singing an old Earth song about sunshine and happiness. Her voice was weak and broken, but she kept singing. The guards looked at each other nervously, unsure what to do. Finally, Dr. Grant was returned to her cell. She collapsed immediately, barely conscious, but she was still humming the song. High Commander Vexathul arrived soon after, his light pattern swirling with what looked like anger and confusion. "This is unacceptable," he told Kylemoth. 4 specimens tested, 4 failures. They are not submitting, they are not cooperating, they are becoming more defiant. Jake heard this conversation and called out from his cell. "Hey, Commander, maybe it's time to try a different approach. How about we sit down and have a nice conversation? I promise not to laugh at you." "Much." Vexthul turned to face Jake. "Your defiance will not last forever, human. We will find your breaking point." "Good luck with that," Jake replied cheerfully. "Humans have been trying to break each other for thousands of years. We've gotten pretty good at not staying broken." As the alien commanders walked away, Jake could hear other prisoners whispering to each other in their own languages. The word was spreading through the ship that something unprecedented was happening. The humans had turned torture into comedy, and their laughter was becoming contagious. High Commander Vexthul stood in his private chamber, staring at the data reports from researcher Kylemoth. The light patterns in his crystal body were chaotic, showing his deep frustration. In 3,000 years of conquest, he had never encountered anything like these humans. "Impossible," he said to himself, reading the reports again. "No species can resist our methods, yet these creatures grow stronger with each session." He called for his military advisor, Sub-Commander Rexvol, a darker crystal being whose body was built for war. When Rexvol arrived, his lights pulsed with controlled aggression. "High Commander, the other prisoners are becoming restless. The humans' behavior is spreading doubt among our subjects." Vexthul's lights flashed angrily. "Explain." 3 prisoners attempted to make sounds similar to human laughter during their punishment sessions yesterday. The Mordaki warrior Grakthon refused to show proper submission. Even some of the Veltari slaves are asking questions about the humans. This was exactly what Vexthul had feared. Order was the foundation of Zephyrian society. If the humans' defiance spread to other species, it could destroy everything they had built. "Double the security around the human cells," he ordered. "And prepare the isolation chambers. We will break them one by one." Meanwhile, in the prison section, Jake was teaching the other prisoners a new game. He had discovered that tapping on the crystal walls in certain patterns could send messages between cells. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. "Okay, everyone," Jake called out. "Ben, you start." Tell us a joke, but tap it out in code. Ben Taylor began tapping on his wall. The rhythm was clumsy at first, but soon other prisoners were tapping back their own messages. Even some of the alien prisoners had learned the basic code. Zektar, the mantis-like warrior, tapped out a message asking what humans found funny about their situation. Jake tapped back a long explanation about how humor helped humans deal with fear and pain. Dr. Grant, still weak from her torture session, managed to tap out medical jokes that made the others laugh even in code. Paul shared engineering humor about the aliens' equipment. Amy told jokes about communication problems with their captors. The crystal corridors filled with the sound of tapping messages, prisoner talking to prisoner across species barriers. The guards tried to stop it, but there were too many cells and too many prisoners. Researcher Kyle Moth was working desperately in his laboratory, trying to understand the human responses. He had dissected the recordings of their torture sessions, analyzed their brain patterns, and studied their physical reactions. Everything showed that they were experiencing genuine pain and fear, yet they continued to laugh. He called up files on every species the Zephyrians had ever encountered. The Mordaki were fierce warriors who fought until death but never laughed at pain. The Veltari were intelligent and tried to negotiate but showed proper fear. The Krindar had powerful psychic abilities but still broke under sufficient pressure. Only the humans were different. Keelmoth decided to try a new approach. Instead of taking them one by one, he would torture all 5 humans at the same time. Surely seeing their friends suffer would break their spirit. The guards brought all 5 humans to a larger testing chamber. 5 crystal chairs were arranged in a circle so each human could see the others. Jake, Paul, Amy, Ben, and Dr. Grant were strapped in simultaneously. Now, Kyle Moth announced, you will see what happens when your defiance hurts those you care about. He activated all the pain devices at once. The screams that filled the chamber were terrible. All 5 humans writhed in agony as waves of pain hit them from multiple directions. But then something amazing happened. Jake, despite his own torture, started telling a story about the worst camping trip he had ever been on. Between screams of pain, he described terrible weather, broken equipment, and food poisoning. But he told it like a comedy routine. Paul picked up the story, adding details about the time their tent collapsed in the rain. Amy contributed a bit about getting lost because their compass was broken. Ben talked about the bears that stole their food. Dr. Grant described treating everyone's injuries with a first aid kit that was missing half its supplies. Together, while being tortured, they turned their shared agony into a shared story. They were suffering together, but they were also laughing together. Killamoth watched in horror as his most intense torture session became some kind of human bonding experience. The pain was real, the damage was significant, but instead of breaking them apart, it was bringing them closer together. "Stop," he commanded, shutting off all the devices. "This is impossible. You should be begging me to stop hurting your companions." Jake looked at the researcher with tears of pain and laughter in his eyes. "You still don't get it, do you? Humans don't abandon each other. When we suffer together. When we laugh together. You can't break us apart because we're stronger as a group." Dr. Grant nodded weakly. "That's what makes us human. We take care of each other even when we can't take care of ourselves." Kylemoth's light patterns were flashing erratically. "Your species makes no sense. Pain should divide you, make you selfish, force you to betray each other to save yourselves." "Maybe that's how your species works," Amy said. "But humans are different. We're social creatures. We're tribal. Attack one of us, and you're attacking all of us." The researcher left them strapped to the chairs and went directly to High Commander Vexthul. His report was frantic and confused. "High Commander, the humans have defeated our strongest methods. Group torture only made them more united. They turned their pain into some kind of ritual that strengthened their bonds." Vexthul's entire body flashed with anger. "Then we will try individual isolation, separate them completely, make them face their fears alone." But when the guards tried to move Ben Taylor to an isolation cell, something unexpected happened. The other alien prisoners began making noise. Not the submission sounds they had been trained to make, but new sounds. Sounds that might have been attempts at human laughter. Zektar was the loudest. The mantis warrior had learned to make a clicking sound that was his species' version of laughter. When the guards tried to silence him, he clicked louder. Soon, dozens of prisoners were making their own versions of defiant sounds. The Veltari made musical tones. The Krindar sent psychic pulses of amusement. Even some of the smaller, weaker species were trying to copy the human behavior. The prison section was in chaos. Guards ran from cell to cell trying to restore order. But the rebellion was spreading faster than they could contain it. High Commander Vexthul arrived with a full squad of warriors. The sight that greeted him was beyond his worst nightmares. Prisoners from dozens of different species were making noise, refusing to show submission, and some were even attempting to tap messages to each other, like the humans had taught them. "Silence," Vexthul commanded. His voice amplified through the ship's systems. The noise stopped, but the damage was done. For the first time in Zephyrian history, their prisoners had acted together in defiance. And it was all because of 5 humans who refused to stop laughing. Jake looked at the alien commander through his cell wall. Despite everything they had done to him, he was still smiling. "You know, Commander," Jake said quietly, "I think you're starting to understand the problem. You can torture us, but you can't make us give up hope. And hope, it turns out, is contagious." Vexthul stared at the human for a long moment. His light patterns showed deep uncertainty for the first time since the humans had been captured. The psychological warfare had reached a new level, and the aliens were losing. High Commander Vexthul stood in his command center, watching the chaos spread through his ship. Reports were coming in from every level. Prisoners were refusing orders, making unauthorized sounds, and attempting to communicate with each other. 3,000 years of perfect order were crumbling because of 5 humans. "This ends now," he declared to his assembled officers. "We will make an example that will restore fear to every prisoner on this ship." Researcher Kyle Moth's lights flickered nervously. "High Commander, perhaps we should study them further. Their behavior could teach us something valuable about resistant species." "No," Vexthul said firmly. "We will select one human for public execution. The others will watch their companion die slowly and painfully. This will break their spirit and show the other prisoners what happens to those who defy us." Subcommander Rexfall stepped forward. "Which human should we choose?" Vexthul considered this carefully. "The female healer. The others show protective instincts toward her. Her death will cause the maximum psychological damage." Within an hour, guards surrounded Dr. Lisa Grant's cell. She looked up at them calmly as they opened the crystal door. "Let me guess," she said. "It's my turn for the special treatment?" Jake pressed against his cell wall. "Lisa, no, take me instead." The other crew members shouted similar offers, but the guards ignored them. They dragged Dr. Grant to the main assembly hall, where all the prisoners could watch through crystal viewing panels. The execution chamber was a horrible sight. It contained devices designed to cause maximum pain over the longest possible time. Vexthul wanted Dr. Grant's death to take hours, with every moment visible to the other prisoners. As they strapped her to the main torture device, Dr. Grant looked around at all the watching faces. Hundreds of alien prisoners from dozens of species were staring at her with fear and pity. But in one section she could see her human crew members. They looked terrified but also determined. "Jake," she called out, "remember what we talked about during training. The mission always comes first." Jake understood immediately. Their mission had been to make contact with alien life and learn about the galaxy. Even if they died here, they could still complete that mission by showing these aliens what humanity was really like. Vexthul activated the first torture device. Pain shot through Dr. Grant's body like liquid fire. She screamed, but then she did something that shocked everyone in the chamber. She started to sing. It was an old Earth song about hope and friendship, something her grandmother had taught her when she was young. Her voice was weak and broken by pain, but she kept singing. Jake heard the song and recognized it. Despite being in his cell, he began singing along. His voice carried through the crystal walls, reaching the assembly hall. Paul joined in next, then Amy, then Ben. Soon all 5 humans were singing together, their voices creating a harmony that echoed through the ship. The aliens watched in complete bewilderment. They had expected screaming, begging, and terror. Instead, they were hearing music. Vexthul increased the torture intensity, but Dr. Grant kept singing. Between verses, she even managed to speak to the alien commander. "You know what's funny?" She gasped through the pain. "You think you're breaking me, but you're actually proving everything I believe about humans. We don't give up. We don't abandon each other. And we don't let fear win." The other prisoners began to understand what they were witnessing. This human female was dying, but she was choosing how to die. She was turning her execution into something beautiful instead of something terrifying. Zektar, the mantis warrior, began making his clicking sounds again. This time, other Mordaki prisoners joined him. The Veltari started their musical tones. Even the smallest, weakest prisoners found their voices. Soon the entire assembly hall was filled with an alien symphony. Dozens of species, each adding their own sounds to the human song. It was chaos, but it was also the most beautiful sound many of them had ever heard. Dr. Grant smiled through her tears of pain. "Do you hear that, Commander? That's the sound of hope. You can't torture hope out of people. You can only make it stronger." Vexthul was frantically increasing the torture, devices trying to make her stop singing, stop inspiring the others. But with each increase in pain, the song got louder as more prisoners joined in. "This is impossible," Kyle Moth shouted over the noise. "She should be broken. They should all be terrified." Dr. Grant's voice was getting weaker, but she kept singing until the very end. Her last words were not screams of pain, but words of love for her crew and hope for the future. When she died, the singing stopped. The assembly hall fell silent, but then something unprecedented happened. Jake's voice rose from his cell, not in song this time, but in laughter. Not the bitter laughter of someone who had lost hope, but the warm laughter of someone who had just witnessed something amazing. "Lisa, you magnificent woman," he called out. "You just showed this entire ship what humans are made of." The other crew members began laughing too. Not because they were happy that their friend was dead, but because they understood what she had accomplished. She had died on her own terms, inspiring hundreds of prisoners and proving that the human spirit could not be broken. Vexthul stared at the dead human and the laughing prisoners with complete incomprehension. They should be broken. Their companion is dead. Why are they celebrating? Researcher Keelmoth approached him slowly. "Hi, Commander. I believe we have made a serious error. These humans do not fear death the way other species do. They fear meaningless death, but they celebrate meaningful death. We have just given their companion the most meaningful death possible." The realization hit Vexthul like a physical blow. By trying to break the humans, he had only proven their strength. By killing their healer in front of hundreds of prisoners, he had created a legend that would spread throughout the galaxy. Reports began coming in from all over the ship. Prisoners were refusing to work. Some were openly defying guards. The humans. Death had not restored order. It had destroyed what little control remained. "Release them," Vexthul said quietly. "Hi, Commander," Rexaval asked in confusion. "Release the humans. All of them. Return them to their ship." Killmoth's lights flashed, in protest. "But our research is complete," Vexthul interrupted. "We have learned everything we need to know about this species. They cannot be conquered because they refuse to be conquered. They cannot be broken because they support each other. And they cannot be intimidated because they find meaning in sacrifice." As the surviving humans were escorted back to their ship, Jake stopped in front of Vexthul. "You want to know how we do it?" Jake asked. "How we laugh through pain, how we find hope in the darkest moments." Vexthul nodded slowly. "It's simple," Jake said. "We remember that no matter how bad things get, they're temporary. Pain ends, suffering ends. But the things we do for each other, the love we show, the hope we share, those things last forever." Lisa knew that. That's why she could sing while dying. Jake paused at the doorway. "You should spread the word, Commander. Tell every species in the galaxy, humans are coming to the stars, And we're bringing something you've never seen before. We're bringing hope. As the New Horizon departed Zephyrian space, word was already spreading through subspace communications. The galaxy would soon know about the species that laughed at torture, sang through death, and turned suffering into strength. Humanity had announced itself to the universe not through conquest or technology, but through the unbreakable power of the human spirit. And the aliens who witnessed it would never be the same.